Initiating moisture.
Splish splash, I'm sucking your ass. I'm just kidding, that's not me. That's the new Maze Runner movie called Maze Runner the Death Cure. Welcome to the Moist Meter. Let's go ahead and analyze the moisture content in the third installment of the underwhelming franchise called Maze Runner. So, let's dive right in. The biggest thing I didn't like about this movie is nothing makes sense. It's a jumbled mess of a plot that is almost insulting to the viewer's intelligence. This is a movie where you can't ask why. You can't ask why things happen. Why is a character doing this? Why is that happening? What was that decision for? Why is this going on? Well, the answer is because suck a fart out of my asshole. It happens because I wrote it and my 3-year-old loved it. Just because is why. That is your answer to everything. If you had any questions from the previous movies, they're not going to be answered here. And the decision making makes no sense in this movie. Why things happen the way they do make absolutely no sense at all. And it's incredibly frustrating, really. I love the premise of Maze Runner. I really do think it's a cool premise, except when it turns into some type of gothic zombie flick. But when it's not doing that, I think there's a lot of cool things it offers. This movie visually is pretty damn good, but I can't excuse how nonsensical the plot is. The characters' motives make no sense. Why things happen the way they do make absolutely no sense. It's silly. Downright silly, and it suffers from one of my biggest tropes that I hate in movies. My least favorite movie trope. And it's when a character's in a life or death situation, they have this opportunity to get to safety, but instead of immediately getting to safety, they watch something happening that is threatening their lives. For example, I'm not doing a good job explaining it. So, let's say Harold is our protagonist. He's an 86-year-old man, and he finds himself in a building that's being flooded with radiation as there's flying sharks coming around. His life is very much threatened, but right outside of the window is a helicopter with a rope ladder. Harold is only a few steps away from that rope ladder, but as he's going towards the rope ladder, he hears a massive explosion. All of a sudden, there's a kaiju ravaging behind him. Now his attention is just fixated on the kaiju. Now he's stopped trying to get to safety, and he's watching the kaiju, and he's gonna fucking kill himself because he's too busy watching this unfold instead of getting to safety. This movie has that a ton of times. There's so many times in this movie where the characters sit around when they're in mortal danger and just watch the mortal danger instead of get to safety that is right there readily available for them. I hate that trope. It's the laziest storytelling, the laziest writing ever. It's so silly and it makes me so incredibly distraught and irate. So that's a big complaint of mine. Never do that trope. Never, ever, ever do shit like that. If you're an aspiring director out there, please never do that. I mean it. If you do that, I'm going to find you and I'm going to bite your fucking foreskin off or something. Just something fierce, because it makes me that angry. But now let's get to some things I did like. The fucking director here did wonders with his relatively speaking, low budget. He made this movie visually stunning. I think he did a great job. He built a nice universe and it looked great. He also knew how to handle important character deaths here. He made them very emotional scenes, and it was reflected in good acting from the actors, and also just a really cool send-off for the characters. I'm not trying to spoil anything, but, characters are going to die. It's the end of the trilogy here. You can expect something like that, and he handles it really well, where something like Hunger Games just throws away the most important characters. Oh, what happened to Prim? Yeah, I think a tank ran her over or something. Oh, it's a fucking shame. Let's keep moving on. Here, it clearly affects the characters, and it's really well handled, and I really like that. But overall, I don't think this is a good movie. I wouldn't call it a good movie. I wouldn't necessarily call it a bad movie either. It's an enjoyable movie if you can just excuse how nonsensical and jumbled everything is. But, that doesn't really make it worth seeing in my opinion. There's a lot better movies out there that do what this movie did better. But if you like the Maze Runner movies, I do think this movie's worth watching to finish the story, because it gives you closure. It's not the greatest closure. It's not really well executed or that satisfying, but it's good enough. Better than the Hunger Games, that's for fucking sure. I'm gonna go ahead and go on record and say I think what killed the Hunger Games is my character in the movie not even being in the fucking movie. That pissed me the fuck off. If you're watching Hunger Games directors, Jennifer Lawrence, if my character was in that movie, you'd be looking at 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. At least. Maybe even some Academy Awards across the board too. Who knows? Just saying, could have been that. Could have had that if you had just kept my goddamn stupid fucking line in that movie. But anyway, enough of that. Moving on. Let's pop this shit into the moist meter. I'm giving this a 45%. I would consider it an almost average movie. There's just so much wrong with it, so many lazy choices. But I think working with the source material, I haven't read the books, but I've read enough about them to know that the third book was just a mess that nobody liked, almost unanimously hated. And I think working with that as your source material, they did a good job here. And the universe is nice. The world is great, so that's always a plus. And it's an enjoyable movie, but I wouldn't consider it a good one. I'd consider it just barely below average, thus the 45%. Worth seeing if you've seen the previous two Maze Runners. Don't go in there with high hopes, and you might have a good time. That's it. See ya.